All right, Natalie Ritchie joined us from Sydney, Australia, where it was 4 o'clock in the morning, which was very kind of her. She's the author of Roar Like a Woman, How Feminists Think Women Suck and Men Rock, which will be released June 5th, but you can already pre-order it on Amazon. She explains the difference between feminism and masculinism and how the feminist movement has degraded into the latter. She's a former travel writer and media relations consultant in the tourist industry, and her most recent role was as features editor for Australia's national parenting magazine, Child. She's also the mother of 2 boys. Here she is, Natalie Ritchie from Sydney, Australia. Natalie, thank you for waking up so early to be here. I know it's some ungodly hour in where you are, but I appreciate it.
Oh, anything for you, Andrew? 4:15 a.m. is fine. Yeah.
So, I've been reading Roar Like a Woman, How Feminists Think Women Suck and Men Rock. And I have to tell you that a lot of this is stuff that has occurred to me before, that feminists seem to have adopted male values. Let me just, I will read a quote for the audience and then ask for your comment on it. Feminism cares about career, not because it sees career as women's work, but because it sees it as men's work, and therefore as the pathway to self-actualization for women. Can you explain that? Why do you feel that is?
Yes, I think when feminism began in the 1960s and the 70s, it was such a positive movement. It was about getting women out of those limiting roles of only being a housewife and mother and going out into the world and doing lots of great stuff. That was such a wonderful thing. And it achieved that in a couple of short decades, from 1963 to 1983, say, it basically changed the world. That was wonderful. But then it morphed into the very opposite of what it set out to be. It, instead of attacking the oppression, if you like, that kept women limited to housewives and mothers, it attacked housewives and mothers themselves. And so instead of being a left-wing movement that purported to care about women as a minority, it flung itself at the feet of, the big bad white men on the right kind of thing, and said, no, he is the way, the truth, and the light. You've got to be him or you're not as good as him. And so it's actually morphed into a very misogynist patriarchal movement. It has become a patriarchy all its own.
It really is true. And for a left-wing movement, it has also adopted the values of capitalism. It basically says to women, if you're not making money, if you're not making the same amount of money as somebody else, you're kind of a failure.
That's right. Men have been taken as the benchmark, and women are no longer legitimate people in their own right. And when you worship men like that, you worship the dimensions of life that men live in. And, men are primarily spend their day in the public dimension of life. It's business, it's government, it's politics, law, academia. And so feminism has pumped all the oxygen to those dimensions and drained validation from the big private dimension, if you like, the place outside the workplace, the home, the community, the family, the connections between people. And I wonder if that is why, or if that is contributing to the anxiety that we all feel today. Because if you're living to work, if you're living to govern, you're not living well. Business and government are there to serve the business of living. We work to live, we govern to live. And so feminism has really inverted the purpose of why we're all here.
While I certainly agree with you that when feminism got started in the 60s and 70s, there were changes that needed to be made. Our gender roles had become very restrictive, and there were all kinds of reasons, technology and birth control, why women were now free of certain things that they weren't free of before. But very early on, there was a kind of tendency toward this in the movement. Simone de Beauvoir famously said that she didn't believe that women should be allowed to make the choice of being homemakers because too many women would make that choice, which translates into women shouldn't live the way they want to live. They should live the way Simone de Beauvoir wants them to live.
That's right.
Why do you think that strain of feminism has taken over?
I think my personal theory is that those masculinist women, I would call them masculinist women, have probably grown up in homes where they didn't have what I would call strong women. women who actually valued what women bring to the world, the mothering, most obviously, running a home, which matters, dinner matters, a clean house matters, the kids matter. Your neighbors matter, the connections with the community matter. She's a woman is probably caring for, her own elderly parents. These things all matter too. And the only difference I would say between a failed woman and a successful woman is self-respect. You don't have to like being a housewife. You don't even have to enjoy being a mother. Lots of mothers don't enjoy everything about motherhood, but you do need to respect it. What you're doing matters. And feminism is saying what women bring to the world doesn't matter. Only what he brings matters. And that is causing women to, attack ourselves. We're actually believing that we suck. But if we do what a man does, if we have that CV, then we don't suck anymore. And it's got to be the same CV he's got. We've got to be doing the same jobs, working the same hours. And what that means is that if every woman is doing what a man does, then no woman is doing what women do. And if a man is a petroleum engineer, then she's got to be a petroleum engineer. And she can't, run a ballet studio or run a manicure salon unless he runs a ballet studio or owns a manicure salon. So we get to this insane world where women are eradicated and the stock of masculinity in the world is effectively doubled.
It really is strange, especially because it depends upon women hiring other women to do the things that women have traditionally loved to do, like nurture children. I mean, it's not like the children can run free. Somebody's got to come in and take care of them. And usually that means that upper class women are hiring lower class women. So it doesn't actually change anything. It just supports the rich over the poor.
Yes. And, if you can't afford to buy that help in, then you wear it all yourself. The average woman takes on both the, say, 40-hour week that a man is working, which we consider a full-time contribution from a man. She's also doing the immensity of motherhood. I totted up the hours that I worked with, if you have an ever-crying baby, as I did with my first child, if you have a toddler, if you're running a home, and that can all add up. I calculated it came to over 300 hours a week. I mean, obviously, she's not doing 300 hours a week, but if she was cleaning the bathroom, if she was doing all the different chores that are there to be done, that's how much work it is. And then feminism comes along and slams a 40-hour week down on her head as well and says, you've got to do that before you're his equal. He doesn't have to do what she does before feminism considers him to be her equal. Feminism isn't saying, oh, men are in a distressing state of inferiority because they're not mothering. And so we have this incredibly unequal situation now where women are left with their 50% share of the domestic and parenting load. They're doing most of his 50% share of the domestic and parenting load, and they're doing as much as 100% of his paid 40-hour week. And this is untenable. If you're wealthy, yes, you can afford the working class women to come into your home. I just spoke to a woman recently who had what she called a household manager, which is it's a housekeeper. So in addition to a cleaner, she had someone come in 4 hours a day at that school hour time, about 2 to 6 p.m. She cooked dinner, she tended to the kids, she got the homework done. And that's fantastic. But what that woman was doing was acknowledging how much work she does and was actually willing to pay for it. But most of us cannot afford to do that. And so women are just absorbing and absorbing and absorbing more and more. And the pressure is not letting up from feminism. I thought it would actually pull back after that first intense masculinist era of the 80s and 90s. But in fact, it calls for gender equality, where 100% of women do what 100% of men do, are ramping up. Feminism is interpreting equality as a 50-50 breakdown of any given endeavor. Well, 50-50 is just another way of saying 100-100. It's about saying 100% of women have got to do what 100% of men do.
There's a tendency among feminists, certainly among the feminists who are most outspoken now, to attribute certain attitudes to men that are only true of the worst sorts of men. So they talk about men as being pigs to women. They talk about men as not having respect for what women do. But of course, most men, we just had Mother's Day here yesterday. I mean, most men, the last words they ever speak on earth are calling for their mothers. They think about their mothers with very high regard. I've been around men all my life, and when they speak of their wives, oddly enough, I mean, if you only went by what you saw on television, you would think that men were constantly making snarky remarks about their wives. But in locker rooms and places where men gather, men speak about their wives with enormous respect. It makes me wonder, is feminism being led by a group of women who are projecting those attitudes, that those are their attitudes, that they hate themselves as mothers, they hate themselves as wives, and they're projecting that attitude on men?
I think so, totally. I think I have never yet met an avowed feminist who speaks well of her own mother or who speaks well of her own father. She might worship her father, but what I've noticed is that feminists always seem to see men as powerful, but powerful in negative ways. They're powerful through being absent as a deserting father, or through arrogance, or through alcoholism or abuse. And they tend to see their mothers as powerless, as damaged or crippled. And then I think, yes, they are projecting those ugly family dynamics onto society at large. They're probably only a minority of women, but we all tend to go along with feminism because it stands up for women's rights to a career, and we don't want to be seen to renounce our right to career. We think feminism is our friend, so we get pulled along in the wake of those masculinist women who really do not have respect for themselves or respect for men. Men are not toxic. Masculinity is not toxic. Masculinity is wonderful. Masculinity gave us just about everything worth having. It gave us freedom, political systems, the economy, invention, science. It's just about everything we use.
It's a very strange. One of the things that you wrote about that really I was so happy to see you write about was single motherhood. I mean, I've visited a lot of prisons, and I've seen when you walk by the cells, what you are seeing is one fatherless child after another. How do you feel that feminism has increased single motherhood, and why do you feel that is so bad?
Yes, I think it's bad because I have been a single mother. My marriage ended when my two sons were 4 and 5, and it breaks me, frankly. I do not get by. I have an education, I can get a job, but how do I get a job when I already have the world's busiest job, taking care of children? And, the jobs in my field are in a location in my city that is a very long distance from my house. I cannot make that commute in 1 hour. Even if I were to find a job at 5 p.m., which in my city, I live in Sydney, Australia, jobs finish at like 6:30 p.m. And then you've got to make a very long commute to the daycare center, which closes at 6 p.m. They all shut at 6 p.m. here. And then you've got to get home. It takes me 40 minutes to get home. To be getting into the home at 6:40 p.m. and starting to get dinner cooked, to get the kids inside, the whining, what it's like, all the dishes that haven't been cleared since the morning, all of that stuff. It is impossible. And yet feminism is acting as if that immense job of motherhood does not exist, and that a woman can do both his work, if you call it his work of earning a living, and her work of motherhood, at the very same time.
Yeah.
So it's become an individualist movement that's acting as if families don't exist and people don't need each other, but people do need each other. I'm running out of time. I want to ask you the last question. You talk about a woman-shaped world. What does a woman-shaped world look like exactly? Oh, yeah. I think a woman-shaped world, it would just be a world that gives a woman her due equally as much as we give a man his due, that particularly in the workplace, just accommodate the work that women are already doing, running homes and taking care of the kids, and actually shapes jobs to fit that reality. We design a job to start at, say, 9 a.m., finish around 5 p.m., to give a man time to eat breakfast, travel to work, come home, eat dinner, have an evening. We give him 2 whole days out of 7 in which to rest. We give him annual vacation. But we're not doing that so we're acknowledging his humanity. We're not really acknowledging her human experience, which is the experience of running homes and caring for kids. We could have a parallel school hours economy that I think more than anything else in the workplace would make an enormous difference to women's lives. It would be a very empowering thing. Employers have businesses to run, of course they do, but employers had mothers too. Mothers are everybody. Everybody on earth had a mother, and we should be able to be accommodating that immense workload.
It's funny. I believe that more than anything that feminists say, and male oppression or anything, the biggest problem women have today is that industry has taken a lot of what used to be home industries out into the factory and left at-home mothers without a way to make a living while being an at-home mother, which they used to have. And that is a problem that really needs solving. Thank you, Natalie Ritchie, author of Roar Like a Woman, How Feminists Think Women Suck and Men Rock. Thank you for getting up so early in Sydney, Australia. I appreciate it. It's really nice talking to you.
It has been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.